Microsoft Build. Thanks to everybody for joining. We have a lot of people sign up for this webinar, and I'm really excited to share what I learned in Seattle. And this is coming from the eyes of a former developer. I mean, I don't write a ton of code, but well, maybe we'll talk about that when I introduce myself. Nathan, how about you introduce yourself really quick?
Sure. Nice to see everybody. I'm Nathan Lesnowski. I'm Concurrency's Chief Technology Officer, and I just loved Build. I loved everything about it. I loved the new announcements, the the adding on to what we talked about last year. We're going to get into more, and I'm just thrilled to have this conversation. If you want to connect with Brian or I, hit our QR codes. They're currently on the screen. This is going to go to our LinkedIn. We love to build and create communities, so we're excited to connect with you and to talk about the exciting things that we're talking about today more.
Yeah, and so I'm a solution architect at Concurrency. I've been out to build. This is, I think, my third or fourth time. This was a fantastic build. And feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I got my official build badge today. I'm going to give you a
Nice.
little bit of a fair warning. I typically tell myself to slow down when I do presentations so I don't talk too fast. I am ripping this up today because there is way too much content for us to go through. So to kick things off, I wanted to level set a little bit about what build of 2023 was. So last year was really exciting. There was a big wow factor. We got to see what copilots looked like. I mean, it was just incredible, seeing the interactions and what you could do inside the Microsoft ecosystem was just, something that I will never forget, that kind of an experience. There was one other, I don't want to talk about Google too much, but when they did that, booking your hairdresser kind of call, that was wow moment. Build 2023 was even better. I mean, it was just, this is stuff I can do. And I've been using all these copilots, for the entire year. But what was kind of missing was, how the developers actually going to use it. I remember in 2023, there were a couple of booths that I went to talking about building various copilots. And even from the product teams, they're like, well, eventually you're going to be able to put this into a marketplace, but we haven't really built a marketplace and we haven't really finished these SDKs. This year was all about enabling developers to build copilots and leverage all these different tools. So very exciting. That's what we're going to talk about today. The first thing I'm going to talk about is GPT 4.0. So just a couple of weeks ago, 4.0 was released, and this was brought into the ecosystem and really highlighted, as part of Build this year. And two things I would talk about here. First off, it was almost immediate that 4.0 was delivered from OpenAI as it was available in the Microsoft ecosystem. So on the right side of the screen, you can see, you can actually go in your OpenAI service right now and deploy a GPT 4.0 model. And if you're wondering how cool this is, what you're seeing here is an image. It's a picture I took on my phone at one of the sessions. And I, said, explain this to me. And this is something that you would not have been able to do with any of the previous GPTs. Multimodal. I've got this image. I've got some people in there. I've got some text on the screen. It's at an odd angle. And I just said, hey, explain this image to me. And it came back and said, looks like this is part of a Microsoft event. There's some branding. It knew what the words were on there. It was able to read that and describe it fairly accurately in terms of that capability. So this is something that is now available in the OpenAI service, and you can start to play with it. I'm going to give you one caveat, or one thing that you should understand is that, like last year when OpenAI was released, the OpenAI service was released, it's kind of throttled. This 4.0 model is throttled. I believe it's around 10 or 15 requests every 2 minutes is what the current throttle is. But as they build some of this capacity, in the Azure infrastructure, I'm sure that that'll, become a little bit more readily available. But very cool, super powerful GPT model, multimodal, absolutely fantastic. The other thing that they really stressed was around this, building the developer community. So Microsoft announced a couple of new applied skilled credentials. These aren't like certifications, but these are learning tracks, essentially for building AI into your application ecosystem. And we'll talk about like the specifics of the different components that you can use and what's out there. But I wanted to call this out because there were several talks. Scott Hanselman was talking about getting into these training tracks, and so if you're looking to dive deeper into this and you felt a little bit lost in the ecosystem, Microsoft announced these learning tracks for you.
I'm not
Uh,
usually like a big Microsoft security guy or Microsoft training guy, but I was really impressed by how quickly they had a practical certification, like mini cert on semantic kernel. Like that's already a thing that you have learned material and guides to go through. Given how new that is and how like fundamental it is to the agent ecosystem, that was pretty cool to me.
Yeah, and like that first bullet point too, how to actually prompt your GitHub Copilot, right? So like adoption is like a big thing, and we talk about this, Nathan, with our customers all the time in terms of Copilot, whether it's GitHub or whatever, the M365 Copilots. But if people, you can give them the license, but if they don't use it, they're not getting the value. And I was at a talk last night where the presenter made the point, and this really nails it with that first bullet point. If you aren't investing the $20 a month for your developers to use Copilot, you are wasting their money and their time. This is a productivity tool that will increase productivity 40 to 60%, like literally 40%, 40, 60% more productivity out of your developer for $360 a year. I mean, it's a no-brainer. You're not being a good steward of people's money if you aren't using it. All right, so Visual Studio benefits, again, more on this learning track and supporting the developer. I did talk to a friend of mine, Jacqueline. She's awesome. She's one of the product managers. I've met her the last couple of years, and I asked her what's the big thing you want me to talk about. And in your MSDN subscription now, it's a new benefit. Are credits up to $900 for virtual events or on-site events like the VS Live. And if you haven't done VS Live, it's kind of like a more focused um, workshop-based mini build, if you want to think of it. There's 4 of them every year, spaced out around the country. There's one coming up, I believe, in June in Seattle. The last one was in Chicago. They kind of do them across the different areas. So that is like a huge important benefit that you're going to want to take advantage of. I looked at some of the online training. There's some, virtual sessions for how to like develop these AI capabilities inside of your application. So definitely check that out. It's a huge benefit, which is basically like a half off of like some of these virtual sessions. They're like maybe $1,200, $1,300, and $900 off would be, pretty cool. I did also ask her a little bit about like the next version or the next release. Visual Studio 2022 is the last major release, and they don't have anything in the roadmap that she was able to share with me. They don't have any like real plans to release a new version of Visual Studio. So I asked her the question, what about like being more like Visual Studio Code and not having to always install new versions? I had a lot of getting prepped for build on my personal computer, trying to get all the components up to date and all that kind of stuff. And she said, right now that's not even something they're thinking about, because Visual Studio is more for an enterprise environment. There's just most companies they want to have control over what versions are being installed, different softwares. So not I don't know. I gave her the feedback. I didn't like it. Uh, Next, coming up, we talked about GitHub a little bit. GitHub extensions. So GitHub extensions are ways for you to interact with different organizations that have set up specialized uh, um, uh, Q&A bots, if you want to think of them that way. So you can at Docker and ask a question specifically about Docker, and that's feeding in through an extension. Developers now have the ability to add their own extensions into GitHub and be able to prompt as well. And so that's a capability that's out in private preview, to build your own extensions, but these extensions will now be available in GitHub, as a GitHub user. So that's pretty exciting. I know that the screen's a little bit small here in terms of what's actually on it, but there's a variety of different ones that are going to be adding them, probably on a weekly basis moving forward. Developers life in Teams got an upgrade, so you're starting to see some really cool cards coming out in Copilot and inside of Teams. And here's one that I thought was really cool, where you can take code snippets, just basically linked to a repo inside of Teams, and it builds out the card for you. So as developers are sort of collaborating and working in teams, uh, they're able to share code in a more real-time fashion without having to click the link and go take a look at this code snippet. So this was something that again. The mantra here is that the developer is taking a first-class seat in this build. All these different features kind of tie together. And then lastly, before we get into some of the more specifics, like diving deep into the technology, there's a new AI toolkit that's out for Visual Studio Code. This is this is an extension for VS Code that is going to make your life easier as you're working with different models. It exposes you to an AI toolkit, the model catalog, which is a set of curated models from both the Azure AI Studio, but it's also going to have support for like Hugging Face models as well, so you'll be able to bring stuff in there. It also sets up a model playground so you can experiment with things right inside of Visual Studio Code rather than having to go across different platforms. As well as and then doing a little bit of the fine tuning, directly in Visual Studio Code. Other little things to talk about, you can deploy, basically single click deploy from Visual Studio into your container apps, and also like get some of the telemetry metrics as well to see how things are kind of performing in real time. So this is a really cool feature. I did not have a lot of success getting this installed. It is in preview mode. So there's some versioning things that you want to be careful about. So give yourself a little bit of time to get this up and running. But yeah, make sure you get your right versions and updates and all that kind of stuff. Moving on. One of my aha moments in build this year was around API management and some of the things that we've had, some of the problems that organizations are having using these models and using the OpenAI service is the expense. I remember talking to a CIO a couple of weeks ago, and they shared a story about, oops, I made a mistake. I was playing around with this and I got a bill for $40,000 or $50,000. And so it's real, especially if you're using like 4 GPT-4 models, which get expensive on the token counts, and you set up all these automations where it's firing things off, it gets really, really pricey. So now in API management, there's two major things that I would like to talk about around that. First is that you can set up policies to your OpenAI service endpoints to do throttling and token management, so that you can limit the kind of expense that you're going to incur right at the API level. The other part is that OpenAI service is elevated to a first-class citizen in API in APM, so you can essentially add your OpenAI endpoints directly from the API management platform, and it'll manage like all the all the security aspects of it for you, get that all wired up. So you don't have to do it manually. You can kind of just, it'll discover the OpenAI instances that you have in your service, and then you can apply the different endpoints that you want, or the different policies to it. So the policies that support are both the token rate limits. There is a policy that is for setting up redundancy and failover, so like a load balancing kind of thing. And then lastly, they have a new policy that allows you to emit some additional telemetry, tying it back to IP addresses or subscription IDs, so that you can better monitor, what's going on, in addition to the throttling capabilities. So very cool, very easy to set up. I watched this demo. It was 10 minutes. And it was boom, 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 got everything set up. It was really, really cool. So here's an example of what that token policy looks like. And then, semantic caching. Man, this goes so fast. I keep forgetting stuff. Semantic caching policy, really, really cool. So this is, let's say that you ask your API, your OpenAI service, a question like, um, tell me how to build a elephant, you know, uh, trailer or something like that. And so now you've got that. It goes into the cache, and you ask a very similar question: how do I make a elephant trailer? Two different words are being used, and typically what that would result in is another request, but it's essentially the same answer. So semantic caching takes, looks at the request, sees that there was a semantically similar request that was sent, and then uses the cache so you're not getting hit with the token again. That's another way that they're going to help to save money and also perform better. So you're not waiting for the LLM to generate a response. So APIM support, very cool. Very excited about it. Nice to see this kind of elevated to a production level support and being able to govern the OpenAI service through APIM. .NET 9 preview is preview 4 is out. That was released in build. There's a couple of cool features that were talked about. I'll dive into those a little bit. But before I get there, .NET 9 is set to be released at .NET Conf this year. Save the date, that's November 12th and November 14th. I'm certain we're going to be doing a webinar. I know a bunch of the local user groups are going to be doing launch events. It should be a good time. But what was included in it? So at a high level, there's a bunch of AI features that we'll dive into. There's this thing called .NET Aspire, and I didn't really know what that was. And I walked up to the booth and was like, am I an idiot for not knowing what this is? And they're like, no, we just released this. Let me tell you all about it. So I'll tell you all about that. And then lastly, kind of the big thing that I noticed was that MongoDB got elevated to support in Entity Framework Core. So you can now start using Mongo. If you already are using MongoDB, you can start using Entity Framework for that as well. But before I go too much further, when I was talking to the ASP.NET Aspire guys, they shared with me that there is a new OpenAI client library for .NET. There was a .NET library to be able to connect to OpenAI natively inside of your C# code, but that was open source and not managed by Microsoft. This is being released. I don't know if like the official announcement was set up. So I kind of asked, well, can I talk about this? And he's like, well, if you see something published, maybe, but there will be an official blog post. I haven't seen the official blog post, but I did find a reference to the client library online, which means that somebody leaked it out before me, and I'm not going to get in trouble for breaking my NDA. But this is going to allow you to use essentially your .NET framework to be able to interact with the GPT LLMs, and really easy to use code. All the configuration for your request is going to be type safety and all the goodness as well. On a side, he did kind of ask my feedback. So maybe if you have an opinion, you want to drop something in the chat. It'd be kind of cool maybe if we did a poll, but I'm not ready to do that. I'm talking way too fast. But they had asked me, like, what do you think about having very specific class libraries for each one of these models? So, having a specific ChatGPT, having a specific, name your model that you want to have. Right now, they just have a single class for each one of those, mostly because the configurations of how you would interact with those are different. Or would you rather have one that's like one to rule them all? They're looking for that feedback as they kind of advance this. So feel free to drop something like that in the chat if you've got an opinion on it. But going back to the AI features. One of the coolest things that developers, I think, are going to be able to use is the new .NET Smart Components. So you can see like a little animated GIF here. What it's doing right now is you've got this form field that's like your typical first name, last name, phone number, email address, whatever. And um, this, this is showing going to the clipboard. This, in this case, it's an email, and copying that content, and then clicking the Smart Paste button, and it sends all that all that raw text data to an AI service to figure out what's supposed to go where, and it autofills your field. I think this is a really cool feature. This is just one way that AI can be used a little bit more tactically to like make your user experience, your apps better, and not have to build like custom implementations of how to do this. So this is available in Blazor, and would be a great thing for you to start to get your feet wet in it, and start using it in a variety of different scenarios. I mean, the address stuff is pretty easy, but maybe you've got some claims forms that you're copying data back and forth all the time. Definitely would make this stuff easier. Smart text area is basically getting that autocomplete, of your sentences as you're typing, and so that's really awesome. Smart combo box, pretty similar, which would be typing in a word and it's going to find a match in the combo list based on like the semantic value of what you're typing in there. And then finally, there's some new features. This goes into like this. Started to see some of this work in .NET version 8, but it's kind of coming to a maturity level. But you can now start doing things like local embeddings. So what this means is that you can go and read from a table, some values, load up that data as an embedding, and then run this locally to get a semantic search value or result, out of that as well. So the benefit here is that you're not making round trips to a service, and you're using your CPU to do this. So you're not using any consumptive service, that you're just running in a local CPU. So those are some cool features around the coding aspect. I promised we would talk a little bit about the .NET Aspire. So he tried to explain it when we first, before I went up to the booth, I like looked at it and read the description and was like, okay, this is not making any sense to me. So I just asked him like, what is this thing? And he described it. And I said, oh, so this is like Unity, but a little cooler, right? And he's like, oh, no, no, no. This is an orchestration. Like it's about how to build this stuff and the apps and the tooling. And I'm like, and I'm listening to it and I'm like, yeah, but it like the code that you're showing me, it looks like Unity. It's just like how I manage my dependencies. And at the end of the day, that's kind of what it is. But a little bit more than that. So it's not just IOC, dependency injection. It's actually like orchestration between the applications. So a good way to think about this is I might have a couple of different APIs, one that's using Redis and one that's not using Redis. Well, I can kind of orchestrate who's using what services. And then I don't have to go in and manually set up all my different connection strings for all these different shared services. Everything's all managed by the Aspire framework. There's some good quick start tooling. It also is like kind of an app launcher as well. And then it also gives you the ability to look at some of the telemetry that's going on in the resources in real time. So you can see on the screen here, there's a little dashboard on the bottom right. You can actually monitor the health of the application and the different components that are running in it in real time, and that comes basically out of the box. So I'm excited to start looking at it and see how this can simplify application development, like with Greenfield, like kickstart new things. And yeah, so check into that. It was a cool feature. Nathan, you added this.
Yeah, I was really excited about what they're talking about with GitHub Copilot Workspaces. In particular, it goes along with some of the other agent conversations that we're going to have later in the deck. But in particular, what I thought was really interesting was the initial versions of GitHub Copilot were like, give me a suggestion on how to write this code. And it was grounded in the content that was just generally available, but not grounded in the content of your actual GitHub environment. Now that code is grounded in your environment. So that's sort of change one. But change two is that it's getting to a point where it can start to build a plan based upon an intent. So if I said, I want to build an application that looks like X, give me the components of that application that need to exist and start to build out a plan for building it. So it can be a collaborator, not just at the like base code level, but can be a collaborator in what do I need to do to be able to construct this application at scale. But then what else they added into this that I thought was really interesting was as suggesting changes to the code or a ground up development, as it's going through these different steps in the workflow, you can edit that as you go. So you're not just sort of like taking what it brings to the table. You have the ability to collaborate with the code suggestions that it's making or the entire build suggestions to be able to participate with it almost in a sense that you're participating with another person that's collaborating with you along the way. So really exciting what they're like. You heard a sort of a noticeable change and they're like, this is just a Copilot to now we want you to start handing off activities to GitHub, Copilot, and functioning within Workspaces to allowing it to be able to do things for you, not just suggesting things that you could do.
Yes, Copilot Workspaces. I didn't see a lot of demos outside of the keynote, but looked like absolutely powerful. And looking forward to working with the team. All right, next, there's Copilot PCs, and I got another slide that talks about what the PCs are. But leading into that, what's going to start happening is that you can start building your applications not relying on a service, but actually start building native applications for Windows, desktops, or even like deploying to your cloud services and using the CPUs and GPUs that are built in and NPUs that are built into your PCs. So they announced a small language model, which is pretty sizable. It's 3.3 billion parameters, called Phi Silica. And now this is a deployable model that you can start to use inside of your applications natively to do generative AI work. So that was a huge announcement. I watched a lot of the work that was going on at the booth and the sessions, talked to a bunch of people. Very, very cool. In order to support that, though, we need runtime and libraries that are going to be able to support that. So coming out are the new Windows Copilot runtime, which is going to allow you to interact at all the different levels, inside of Copilots, inside of your applications. And then APIs that are going to be available to expose not just the Phi Silica that you can bring along, but also as Microsoft builds on this, there's going to be 40 or so different models that are going to be shipping with Windows as well natively. So you get access to that. Recall is this cool feature where you're able to look at a user's activity over time and basically recall events that may have happened using natural language. So that's a really cool feature. I saw a couple of demos. I didn't get a chance to like really unpack it like in my head. But if you think about like being able to like go back in time and review activities, that's going to be a really cool feature. And then like in this localized development, there's going to be a lot more support for the compute power, right? So DirectML is going to support quantization. We've got Onyx runtime that's going to be, available as part of the native Windows, and WebNN, to be able to interact with these NPUs that are coming out. So this is all, these are all features that are just going to make the performance of it better and sort of direct the computational traffic to the right GPU, CPU, NPU in the ecosystem to make it perform better. So what is this Copilot PC? I have I have not pre-ordered one. I'm going to pre-order one before they're coming out. I'm not entirely sure of the date, but let's call it somewhere between 6 and 8 weeks is when these things are going to start to ship. These are going to be PCs that have AI processing built into it to do really, really cool things. There were a lot of different applications that were showcased in both the keynotes, but also like in the different walk around interactive environments. Something that I saw that was really cool, or actually interacted with the PCs, is I was talking with some other young woman that was from South Asia, country, and started speaking in her native language, and I was speaking in my wife's native language. We were able to have a conversation that was closed captioned across the top of the screen. Really, really cool. It was all in English. Like, I mean, we weren't speaking in English, but like we were able to converse just by looking at the closed caption of the screens and answer. Way cool. If you saw the keynote, you saw the real-time ability for Copilot to assist a user in an application. The one that was in the demo was Minecraft. And so the storyline here was that I'm a dad and my son plays, Minecraft all the time, but I don't know how to use this game, but I want to be able to do it with my son. So I jump in and I ask Copilot, like, hey, do you know how to use this thing? And it like literally walked the user through, oh, well, looks like you're playing Minecraft and you need to build a sword because there's some zombies behind you and you got to fight those off. And here's the resources you need. So to get those, you got to walk in this direction. It was like way cool. So this is these are the cool features that are coming out with this Copilot PC. Uh, um, I didn't think the price of them was really, out of line with the current offering in the Surface. There's a few other vendors that are coming out with them, but I'm excited to get one. I'm definitely going to pre-order one. And whether it's for my work PC or my personal PC, or maybe I'm going to get both. I don't know. We'll see. Um, Copilot in Azure. This is being able to use a Copilot inside of Azure Portal to ask questions about your ecosystem in the same way that you would use M365 Copilot to ask for the next time that Nathan and I have available to meet. For example, show me all the VMs that are running with 10% utilization or less so that I can destroy this stuff, or help me deploy a new app service and help me configure some of these things. Really, this feature was released during build. It's in preview. And while it's in preview, it's going to be free for everybody to use. So go ahead and get a taste of it today. You can start using it and get a flavor for what Copilot can bring to you. I don't know what the cost structure is going to be. They didn't talk about it. No announcements on that, but it's in preview. It's going to be there for at least a few months for everybody to use. Cost-effective RAGs at scale. Here it was kind of like, again, like the developers right now are exploring different ways to use the AI capabilities in doing RAG type of solutions. But they get kind of expensive when you don't control things, and specifically with Azure Search, there were performance limitations in terms of the size of the indexes that you could create, but also like the computational performance, which results in consumptive cost. So what's happening is that there is now support for vector search quantization, which is essentially reducing the number of operations that are required to get the same type of result. You're going maybe from a 32-bit to an 8-bit, so the resolution is going to be a little less, but in a lot of use cases, you may find that you're going to get the same answer, with that resolution, but you're going to get that at a much lower cost. They also increase the number, the size, capacity, and without any additional cost. So just better support for the RAG ecosystem. Were there any cost estimators or examples that can be shared? Not off the top of my head. There's so much going on in my head. I'm not sure if I can answer that with any kind of justice. And I'm not sure if they've updated the cost calculator in Azure yet. So what else? Man, we are only halfway through the slides, Nathan, and we are halfway through the time. We are like really on point.
Right on track.
Right on track. And I'm going like a mile a minute. Azure AI Studio. So I think, well, one of the comments that I heard at the booth was that over time, you're going to see all these different Azure AI playgrounds and areas start to converge into one. So it's not happening overnight and immediately, but it is starting to coalesce, and you're starting to see some of this as well. So on the right side, you're seeing, I went in preparation for this and created an Azure AI Studio instance. And I was already able to see like all the different AI components that I had in my subscription for other use cases, all sort of like being brought into this. So you're going to see all this converge into AI Studio versus Azure ML, you know, and all the other different components. You're going to start using it as a single ecosystem. It's very developer centric, you know, a code first kind of a developer experience, being able to interact directly with the CLI, and you know, work with this inside of Visual Studio using like the extensions that I talked about with the AI extensions. Um, in addition, you know, this is bringing a single source of where your model catalog is. You know, we talked about that a little bit in that AI toolkit, but essentially it's, you know, leveraging the AI Studio, you know, as well. So models as a service are coming out. So you'll be able to use, you know, a bunch of different models, prompt flow, and then probably the last thing that I liked about this, the thing that I liked the most about it was being able to monitor the telemetry and doing your tracing and debugging directly through the studio. So all these features are becoming a little bit more robust for developers to be able to interact inside of the Azure ecosystem, and not having to learn like 6 different ways of doing things to get AI embedded into some of your code bases. Nathan, was this you? The evaluation framework?
This was me, yes. One of the things that we've seen as we've been building out AI solutions for customers has been that the sort of base protections that exist within an AI system are insufficient to protect it. So like if you think about like ways that an individual can work around the system prompt to get a AI system to respond in a way that it's not supposed to respond are pretty significant, right? So we've had to build these like shims that exist between the person that's interacting with the AI system and the actual AI system itself to protect either A, the quality of the responses, or B, the types of things that it's allowed to say or not say. And what you're seeing here, and Microsoft talked a lot about it, Build, if you want to watch a really great session, watch Sarah Bird's sessions on these topics, they're building AI protection tooling right into the platform itself, and then can expose that protection tooling on a variety of models, not just OpenAI. So what you can see here is that they build an ability to create an AI evaluation framework where you essentially create the test material, whether your questions or there's sort of like stock questions that you can use that are available to be able to test certain types of jailbreaks or problems, and then have that auto run on a regular basis against your platform, and then also build the shim by using Microsoft's core tooling. So if you kind of progress to the next, click next on it, Brian.
Working on it. Yep. Next.
There we go. Okay, cool.
There we go.
So this is just an example of the kinds of protections that can be built into the it's essentially through Microsoft shim onto your AI platform. So groundedness being probably one of the most significant new additions. So things like self-harm or hateful content or violent content existed before. That's continued to get enhancements. But the one that's really exciting to me is the groundedness protection, because a lot of times you'd see that you'd build an AI system And you would even build in reference assets for it to go back to say, did this, show me where this existed in the source material and give me a link to it. But that, even doing that, it might say that it was in the source material, but it wasn't really in the source material. So groundedness protection's goal is to evaluate, was it actually in the source material? And then being able to have that validation before it goes back to the customer. So you can see what Microsoft's doing is building not only the vehicle to provide protections, but also an ability to evaluate that those protections are working by giving evaluation material, whether it's questions or different types of things you want to test, and then being able to evaluate them.
Yeah, I want to like stack onto that. I was having a conversation with a few QA folks yesterday, and even like UX people as well. In order to build like a really mature, feature or system that uses these components, like let's not forget that this is all new technology. There's not a lot of testing. There's not a lot of like UX support, in the tooling built into it. And so this is a way that Microsoft is maturing that to be part of the normal development lifecycle. Being able to do groundedness detection is so important, for a QA person who's trying to evaluate, is this response actually hallucinating or not, and can I actually get this out in front of my customers in the form of a public facing chatbot, right? So a lot of maturity, happening. And again, that just sort of goes back to the theme that I started with, right? This is for the developers now. It's not just for the data scientists to do their magic and their voodoo. Agents. I know we talk a lot about agents, Nathan, and there's a bunch of tools out there to be able to build agents. LangChain, Lambda Index, LangGraph, these are all components that are more Python centric, frameworks. But semantic kernel, I know you and I have talked about this, Nathan, is more for the Microsoft developer, right? More, it's a .NET, based framework that we can use. You wanna stack on that?
Yeah, just the one of the feedbacks I had heard was that about 50% of the Microsoft Copilots that had been built by Microsoft themselves had been built with semantic kernel. The others started before semantic kernel even existed, and they're having to like catch up now. And what they're finding is the ones built on semantic kernel, they're able to take advantage of the framework so they can move faster. They don't have to build their own framework. And that would be my number one advice would be try not to build your own framework for building agents, because this is a space that's moving so quickly, and you'll see in the kind of successive slides we'll move very quickly through that. Microsoft has invested in the open source community to be able to create semantic kernel and autogen. So if you keep moving to the next slide, what you'll find is there's a tremendous existing asset around what semantic kernel is built based on a lot of community engagement around its existence, but also that's really how they're building it in general. So if you keep moving to the next one, yeah, keep going. There's a Discord community around it, but what is it really? It's an ability to combine a AI system that has its own context, but also has an ability to recall memory from past events, to align that with the ability to create a plan based upon a execution, just like we talked about earlier with Copilot Workspaces, the ability to create a plan to take action, interact with other systems, and then bring that into relationship with other agents that you've created that can hand off activities and do so with a framework that you didn't build yourselves. That's really the main point is you'd have to build the framework yourself. You have to learn a framework that others are contributing to as well.
Yeah, and really accelerate your ability to develop, along with Microsoft in that journey. You brought it up before about the 50%. The co-pilots that are most successful in bringing new features are the ones that are using a semantic kernel. The other ones are starting to lag behind at this point, and probably because they're trying to figure out how quickly can we get this semantic kernel.
Totally.
Yeah, and the memory aspect, right? This is all about the recall, stuff that's coming out, right?
Yeah, I thought this was interesting because it was really speaking to like there's a diversity of ways that you're going to give your agent memories, whether it's short-term or long-term memory in a sense, or even querying other systems. Some of our more mature AI customers are now they're not building just like RAG patterns that return from documents, not that that's not valuable, but they're also starting to build agents that interact with business systems and then perform actions. But that's tied to the existence of the ability to return information that would be a memory for that agent. And then ultimately, this next slide is about like the idea of we're not going to necessarily build one agent to rule them all. We're going to have specialized agents, and this gets into the Copilot Studio conversation of one agent that does the plan, another one hands off to an agent that can perform X, Y, or Z. And you're going to see a lot of like, if 2004 was like the year of RAG, this next year is going to be the year of agents, performing actions, taking activities that we trust them to do.
Yeah, right. Just send a request, and just it's gone. Like you have that workload taken care of for you. We got 15 minutes left, so let's blow through a couple of these things really quick. Copilot Studio, Team Copilots. What do you, Nathan? Let me just jump to this. Process automation and Gen AI. All right, so Power Platform. I don't know if I can do raise of hands or whatever, but Power Platform is a very, very great tool for process automation. And there are a couple of really, really cool announcements. That first slide was one of them. But in the Power Platform, let's first talk about there's cloud flows, which are, I'm going to do some automation around maybe some different APIs or systems that I can connect to that are cloud-based. But then there's also like a use case for like doing desktop automation, like UiPath, is pretty mature in the space. And the Power Platform, has a desktop, flow as well. But it's kind of lagging behind a little bit. With the new show and tell experience, though, I don't think it's lagging behind anymore. I saw some really, really cool demos on the desktop flows. So like a good use case here would be, and we talk to customers about this all the time. I've got this AP process where I get some emails and I've got to go to my AS400, but the AS400 isn't something that's cloud-based. I can't connect to that data. So I can't use a traditional cloud flow. I have to actually go into like these screens and perform these functions. So with the new show and tell experience, you can essentially bring up a screen recorder and explain to the RPA tool how you're using the application so that it can build out the automation for you. And even more importantly, it's got this new self-healing feature, which there were no demos at Build about it. But when I was talking to the product owner, she whipped out her phone and she's like, check this out. The demo that she showed me was somebody entering an equation in calculator. But somebody wiped out the 7 key and moved it around. They switched the 7 and 9 key. I didn't know you could do that, Microsoft, but apparently they did. But it broke the desktop flow. And so in this video, she's showing me that it pops up in the Power Platform, Power Automate environment and says, hey, I can't find the 7 key anymore where the mouse click was supposed to be. But I did find, the 7 key over here. Do you want me to repair your desktop flow? And she clicks the button and boom, it works. I mean, self-healing, totally cool. Let's talk a little bit about the automation flows with Gen AI. So this was a talk that I went to, very cool. Step number 1, define the problem using words. In this particular case, it was pretty robust. I mean, he didn't type this stuff on the screen, but it was, I am a claims adjuster that is doing automotive claims for people that get into accidents. And I've got some business rules. I've got a document here, and he references it, in the prompt. That tells you like what the coverage limits and what the limits are for different aspects of it. Like some of it's service work, some of it's parts work. And essentially what I want you to do is anything that's under $1,000 within these parameters, I want you just to go ahead and approve it. I don't want to deal with it. It's $1,000, just kick it off and get the approval going. Oh, and by the way, I've got some people that have defrauded us in the past. So here's a list of people that if you see a claim from them, like automatically reject it. So he did this, loaded it up in the chat, and the next step was to review it. And there were a couple things that he did. One was he reviewed the inputs and the outputs, like I'm looking for an approval process. and here's the specific inputs that I want. And then he was able to take that document that was just a direct link on a SharePoint, and he was able to ground that as a RAG document, so load it up into the Power Automate flow, and then test it. And it validated everything worked correctly, and he was done. So got rid of all that messy work of like building all the different steps and building out the business rules. It's all handled by Gen AI. Super, super powerful. It was actually one of the coolest things that I saw it build. Um, in addition to that, more support for Copilot inside of the Power Platform. So when you want to do some adjustments, this is going to become a little bit more intuitive. I had some personal experience just before build, so they kind of like had this stuff out a little earlier, where I was really having trouble getting some connectors to work. And then I asked Copilot to do it, and it got rid of all the messy stuff, and it was super fun to work with. The other thing around agents that he talked about, there's new custom copilots that you can start using. You can, learn based on the feedback from the user. There's a lot of different plugins to be able to connect, different things, and it's all through like a Copilot, like describe the problem that you're trying to solve and inside the Power Platform environment. And then it's going to give you some of these like baseline flows built out for you. New Copilot extensions. There's a whole bunch of them. That library is getting really big. I think there's about 50 different extensions that are now available. And even more importantly, if your company has something to offer, you can build your own Copilot extensions and put those into the marketplace as well, which you could not do before. And then here is something really cool that I like, but I also am like completely terrified about what this is going to do for governance in SharePoint. Basically, if you want to create like a custom Copilot to answer some very like specific documents, maybe this would be like, your HR documents are sitting here, or some policy documents that you want to make into a quick little chatbot. You can go just directly from SharePoint, select the 5 or 6 documents that you want to be grounded in, and then it'll automatically create a Copilot for you and publish it to Teams. Super cool, super easy to use. A lot of really, really good use cases, but I can see, organizations letting this get carried away and having to call concurrency to say, I've got 250 Copilots, how do I get rid of them? So very cool, but very scary as well. We're running really, really tight on time here. So let's talk a little bit about Fabric. Two really cool features came out in Fabric. Fabric was announced at Build last year, so I was expecting them to take some course corrections this year at Build, and they did not disappoint. There are two major use cases when I'm talking to customers about Fabric that make it appropriate or not appropriate for us to like build a POC. One is real-time analytics. So Fabric had a limitation to what the data refresh rates could be. And specifically, you couldn't do some of the real-time analytics like you can currently do in Power BI in the Fabric ecosystem because of how it ingests data. So with the real-time intelligence in Microsoft Fabric, you can now start to bring data in event streams and perform real-time analytics in your dashboards. And this is a game changer. A lot of the manufacturing companies that we work with in the Midwest have IoT sensors all over the place. They're trying to create these dashboards, and there wasn't real-time support, so they're always looking at 20 minutes behind on the data, and that's no longer a problem. So a lot of support around that. This is going to be exciting to work with, especially here in the Midwest manufacturing, but I'm sure, a lot of other people have some use cases as well. But the other thing that's really cool is being able to do external data sharing. So There's some limited support in this. I mean, this is the first iteration of it, so it's only going to work with lakehouses and KQL databases, but you own your data. You still own your data, but you can share it to an external customer's tenant, your clients. It's not quite mirroring, but it essentially is going to kind of work with like that. But the most important part about it, I think, is that your governance, the way that your data is tagged, the ownership of that data stays within your organization. It's your governance. It was right before this presentation, I was talking to a customer, and that's super, super important to them because they don't want to lose the governance of that data that they set up. But that still allows them to enrich the data on their own tenant. They're essentially getting the raw data or even an enriched form of the data, but they can do further enrichment for their use cases and play with the data on their own. So that's a really cool feature. And then random thoughts. I think we actually covered a lot of these. We did talk about agents, the semantic kernel. Nathan, thank you for getting me out of this one. But Cosmos DB, I want to talk a little bit about Cosmos DB. So a feature that was released is built-in vector indexing. I know a lot of people are using Cosmos DB already, but it had some performance limitations. And with these updates, I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that in addition to AI search, a lot of companies are going to start using Cosmos DB in their AI solutions. It was already kind of like tailor-made for this with a couple little tweaks. So super happy to see that that come in. Nathan, you talked a little bit about the prompt shields and the groundedness detection. So this is like, this is going to help enhance the safety of AI, make them more testable, make them more extensible. And then a couple other like little side notes. Azure functions are fun to work with. I know that I've done some direct editing of the code, but it was kind of a pain. They're introducing Visual Studio Code embedded into the Azure functions, so it's going to be a more rich editing experience to be able to edit your code directly in the Azure function. Palomi is a popular infrastructure as code framework that's getting support. And then this last bullet point here was something that came directly from my Power Apps team. We work on big, many screen, 20, 50, screen Canvas apps, things like that. And the support for Git is pretty lacking. So that's actually in preview. I believe there was a talk on it. And so that's coming. And then, so that's going to enable better support for co-authoring of your Canvas apps or your Power Apps. I'll pause on this for just a second. Two big resources I think that you're going to want to look into would be go look at the Book of News. Everything that I talked about in here has got a blog post that's referenced. And then I also talked about the dev blog for Microsoft. Set up something that you watch that, on a regular basis. That's where some of these other announcements are going to be coming out. Just yesterday, I saw a really comprehensive blog post sort of recapping a lot of the things that we talked about, but more in a blog fashion. All right, next steps. I would love to have a conversation with you if you saw something here that you want to dive a little bit deeper into. We do a lot of AI and Copilot executive envisioning workshops. But I would say just any kind of envisioning here, if you want to talk about Fabric, if you want to talk about, some of the .NET stuff that's coming out, Copilots, we would love to have that conversation as a next step. So please fill out the survey, and somebody will be in contact with you after that.
Brian, sorry, for some reason our Microsoft survey link is not working. So
still not working?
No, so Paige is going to be reaching out to everybody, and any kind of follow-up conversations or feedback or questions, we're happy to answer.
And I made it. It's 11:59. I don't know how I got through that. Thank you so much for your time, everybody. And I look forward to talking about next steps.